going down the wrong rabbit hole right now.
I mean, you need people who are producers or station owners to take a risk on non-orthodoxical or heterodoxical thought. And with heterodoxical thought, what I mean is, where instead of accepting a position because it's part of a system, you have positions based off of personal examination. So you have to go away from Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and go towards people like Thomas Sowell. The problem is that I feel like station producers right now assume, oh well, no one wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear um, people actually go through facts. That's no fun.
Mm-hmm.
People want to hear battle and war and all that. I would say the person who he's not, and this young man is not on terrestrial radio, but I would say, I don't know. Have you ever checked out Coleman Hughes?
I have at your suggestion. He's very
Mm-hmm.
reasonable, and his
Coleman,
podcasts are short.
if someone takes a risk on a person like Coleman Hughes, and there's other people like Glenn Rowley, he's also a black conservative, or John McWhorter, and I'll say this flat out: the conservative movement needs black conservatives like Thomas Sewell and these other people I talked about. And the reason is because, I'm sorry, they're too obsessed with agitating and provoking black people.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, it's just a fact. The
Mm-hmm.
conservative movement, they spent 3 weeks talking about critical race theory. It was just, they were just basically, they weren't even talking about the actual, what is critical race theory. They were just trying to get as close to being anti-black as possible without being in trouble for being a racist. And until that stops, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
If you have some black conservatives like them who are very conservative, but they're also speaking from the perspective of black people without necessarily, the black conservatives that they like are the ones who come out and say black people are dummies, and you know, they go to that extreme and they kind of make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're willing to take their chance on another person, have you heard of um there was a 97.1 has one person that I think, what's her name, was Annie, I think her name was Annie Frank. Anyway, she comes on from 3 to 12 to 3, and pull up her
Annie
name.
Fry.
But anyway,
Yeah.
Annie Fry,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Mm-hmm. She's on maternity
She's a
leave, I think, right now.
yeah. She's a millennial, and that's what she has on her thing. That she's younger. And I listen to that show, and I don't. I feel more like it's 2010 with their vibe. It's not so hateful. It's not hateful at all, and I feel like it's back to that street level where they're conservative, but they're not so extremely part. They're not so polarized in their cultural reactionary. You know,
They're not
they
zealots.
examine. They're not zealous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I listen to that show and I say, well, that's so maybe you need some younger folks. Maybe you need some people, some new fresh blood, because this generation of the 2008 2009 group, they're all selling this extreme conflict,
Would you
this
put
cultural.
Would you put Ben Shapiro in that category?
No, which category?
The young people that could save
Yes,
talk
yes,
radio.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Ben Shapiro, I would definitely put him in the pot in on the right side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and right now, even people like Ben Shapiro, they're not tribal enough. You know, local radio rewards you for being loyal to the Trump base,
Yeah.
which is, and that's going nowhere, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
because there's only so many people. Trump wasn't that popular. You know, you most people voted for Trump. I don't even think liked him. I think they were just like, well, we don't want Hillary Clinton, and we didn't want Joe Biden, and we don't trust the Democrats because, and like I said, I think the Democrats lost seats because of from being so extreme on COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look, the Republicans did better than Trump in most places.
Just not in the presidential election.
just not in the presidential race.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in places that had like California, Michigan. You look around the places where the people were trying to be really the Democrats were overboard with the COVID stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You saw Republicans pick up seats.
Yeah.
So there is an avenue to be Republican and to succeed without being a big dummy like Donald Trump, because he's just the dude's just out of control. You know what I mean?
Well, if I hear you correctly, then what would save talk radio would be, first of all, get some younger people in there.
Right.
And I guess mainly get some younger people in there and who aren't so polarizing.
And it's not just the youth, because there's a lot of, I mean, there's people like Josh Hawley who's as bad as anybody. So it's not just the age; it's also it's also the
with different ideals and different perspectives. Okay.
Right. And again, I think the new direction and the new, what I would say is, look for people who are not orthodoxical on either side. And that goes for the left too. I think the left has a problem too, because they have you have to have this position on masks. You have to be for mask mandates. And if you're not, then you want to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's crazy too.
Yeah.
Why? I think there's a market for people to just say, well, let's have a rational conversation about it. And if you don't agree with me, I don't think I've ever had an extreme position on COVID-19. I'm actually very focused on it. But there's literally half the people I know are like, you're trying to kill people by questioning this and questioning lockdowns. And I'm like, I think there's a place for people to meet in the middle and have a conversation, but someone's got to take a chance on it financially.
Well, I will tell you, people like Coleman Hughes, and I like him. He's refreshing. He's intellectual. He's easy to listen to. As far as I'm concerned, and he has a podcast. He's not on a radio station, but I've always been a proponent. I shouldn't say always. Maybe in the last 6 years or so, is radio to me. Radio is not the device that you turn on. Radio is audio, okay? And to me, a podcast can be radio. Anything like that can be radio. And to me, what's going to save talk radio, maybe this is being a little pompous, but what we're doing right now, what Coleman Hughes is doing right now. Less and less people all the time listen to terrestrial radio. And I think I don't think that's because they'd rather listen on their iPhone, because you can listen to terrestrial radio on the iPhone too. There's just the content that's not entertaining. And if I'm sorry, if you can't find a podcast that's entertaining, you're not trying, because there's hundreds of thousands of them out there.
Right.
So, so what we're doing today, what we're doing right now, what Hughes is doing, what others are doing, I think that's what's going to save radio. I really do.
I think so. Yeah.
I do.
People really like it.
They do.
I hear people when I tear them on the Coleman Hughes, they're like, man, left or the right, people say that's really good, But there was a time when Coleman Hughes was getting the treatment that the right gives to so-called non-Trumpers.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting that because he was actually at one time part of the he was involved in Black Lives Matter and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke and he questioned the rationale of he went to Congress and questioned reparations and got all this hate mail from the anti-racist community or whatever, or the Black authenticity community. But over time, Black people kind of stopped really blasting them. Mm-hmm. And most of this criticism would come from white liberals. So I think the appeal that a lot of the right has is that people see how extreme white liberals are, or liberals in general.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, well, I want a defense against that. And liberals see how extreme the right is. And they go for people who they might not normally go for because they want a defense. If people could see that there's another space and there's another option, maybe people would start divesting from these extremes.
I think that's true, and I think via the podcast that can happen. I mean, even my little podcast here. This is podcast number 232. It's the 232nd one that I've done, And in my statistics that I'm looking at, less than 40% of the people that listen to this podcast are from the state of Missouri. Less than 40%. The second is New York State. The third is Illinois. That makes sense. The fourth is California. I've got listeners in India, Sweden, Russia, Germany. I mean, my India listenership, for some reason, once upon a time, it's dropped now considerably, but close to 10% of all my listeners were in India. And I don't know why. I think it's because I had a gentleman on who had done a lot of, as a young man, he had gone to India and done, he lived there for like 4 years. Okay. And we promoted that on GeoSavan, which is the big India podcast site, and people got interested in it. Well, it's been a while since he's been on. So listenership in India has dropped off, but that's the dual-edged swords with podcasts. Okay. Sure. Lots of people listen to this podcast, more than I ever thought it would in my wildest imaginations, and from places I never dreamed of. But it's real hard to monetize that. You can't go to the local meat market and say, support my podcast, when most of the people who listen don't even live in this state.
Well, and that's the second part of the equation is there has to be a financial model that it was going to take some kind of significant capital investment to make this kind of thing, come in and replace what we have now.
Yeah.
They were like, because even I saw the commercials change dramatically on 97.1, to the point where it sounded like everything else, every third commercial was male enhancement.
Yeah.
I mean, be honest. I mean, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Where did this come from? And it's because less and less people wanted to invest in that kind of radio. Sure, like, we discussed it. It's an age group that has more money, but the people who have the money or have the products they want to buy don't want to advertise on that show.
Right.
They just don't want to be a part of somebody getting on there saying, yeah, well, you know what? Trayvon Martin deserved to get shot. They don't want to have their product with a person saying it's not worth it to them.
No.
Why take that risk?
No.
Because then a bunch of people say, hey, this person said something racist and you're advertising on it. It becomes the opposite of what they're trying to do in terms of putting it on the show.
So you get My Pillow, you get Buy Your Gold from Me, and Dr. Woody's boner pills.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And that's so hopefully somebody will say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should try something else.
Yeah. Well, I am the ultimate glass half full guy, and I always have faith that in the end, maybe later rather than sooner, the cream will come to the top and life will be good once again in the world of radio. I hope so.
It's always an opportunity,
Yeah. Well, hey, James, thank you for taking time. I appreciate it. And
great.
And I always enjoy having you on. The listeners always enjoy having you on. I'm not ashamed to say that when you're on, those are some of the highest rated podcasts that I have. So you're loved by my listeners also. So thanks again.
Right.
And hey, have a good rest of the evening. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Well, that's it. We're done. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me your email address. I will go ahead and send you a link to the podcast upon publication. You can download it and listen to it at your leisure. Until next time, this is James Strong saying, adios.